The so-called ceasefire in Gaza is on the brink of collapse, and the reason it's going to collapse is because of what I just said. This is a so-called ceasefire because Israel has systematically violated the terms of that ceasefire. US President Donald Trump has declared that if all Israeli hostages aren't released this Saturday, then quote-unquote, all hell will break loose. It comes in the context of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is an international fugitive sought by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity, has made it clear, in the clearest possible terms, repeatedly, that he wishes to resume his murderous onslaught against Gaza. It comes in the additional context of President Trump making it clear he did not believe the ceasefire would last and repeatedly endorsing the illegal annexation of Gaza by the United States of America and the forcible permanent removal of its entire population, an act of ethnic cleansing which would constitute a crime against humanity and be innately genocidal in method and in outcome. Let's discuss what's happened. Hamas has announced that it is delaying the release of Israeli hostages indefinitely because of alleged Israeli violations of the ceasefire. And when I say alleged, they're real. We'll go on about that. That ceasefire is held for 3 weeks and was greeted with jubilation and exhilaration by a traumatized Palestinian population. We were in the first phase of that ceasefire deal, due to last 42 days, with the second phase in which the remaining Israeli hostages are released, as well as Palestinian detainees, many of them, in practice, hostages seized without trial or charge by the Israeli state and subjected to hideous torture, rape, dozens of them tortured and raped to death, all of that in exchange for a lasting ceasefire. The Israeli state has now cancelled leave for its soldiers and is preparing to renew its genocidal onslaught against the people of Gaza. Now, as Mustafa Barghouti, the General Secretary of the centre-left Palestinian National Initiative, puts it, the ceasefire has been violated in 3 ways by the Israeli army. Number 1, 25 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza and dozens wounded since the so-called ceasefire began. Does this sound like a ceasefire to you? Now, call me old-fashioned, sure, but my definition of ceasefire is when armed forces cease firing. Secondly, Barghouti notes that the Israeli army are obstructing humanitarian aid, including crucial supplies of tents and shelter, bearing in mind that most of the homes of the Palestinian people have been destroyed. That includes 8,500 of 12,000 aid trucks that were promised to enter Gaza. That includes 15 fuel trucks instead of 50 entering Gaza each day. None of the 60,000 promised temporary housing units have been delivered to Gaza, and just 20,000 of the 200,000 promised tents have been delivered. Now, according to Trey Yingst, and bear in mind, he's the chief foreign correspondent of Fox News, one of the 4 key ceasefire issues right now is that of caravans, temporary homes for Palestinians in Gaza. An official with knowledge of the talks tells me a number of countries and international organizations, including the United Nations and Qatar, have requested to send caravans to Gaza in accordance with the agreement. All the requests have so far been rejected without explanation, according to this official. Israel must approve for the caravans to enter. Now, number 3, Barghouti notes Netanyahu and Trump have provoked Palestinians with repeated statements about their intentions to totally ethnically cleanse Gaza. Imagine all of this. Just take a step back for 1 second. Imagine Hamas militants had killed multiple Israeli soldiers, let alone Israeli civilians. Nobody would be talking about a ceasefire, let alone a parallel universe where there was a serious proposal backed by the US to ethnically cleanse the whole of Israel. Imagine just 1 Israeli had been killed in Gaza or by Palestinian militants in Gaza. No one would be talking about ceasefire. And this just underlines racist dehumanization. It's not just Gaza, by the way, because Palestinians feel themselves strongly to be part of Palestine. The clue really is in the name. The West Bank and Gaza are both equally part of Palestine. And in the West Bank, the Israeli state has been on the rampage. In January alone, Israel killed nearly 70 Palestinians with a 14% increase in violent incidents compared to the previous month. As the Israeli newspaper Haaretz notes, the Israeli army have expanded the open fire orders in the West Bank, resulting in a high number of deaths of Palestinian civilians. Here's one example of one particular atrocity this month. Soldiers shot to death a man and his wife, a woman, in the 8th month of her pregnancy. According to the IDF preliminary investigation, the man was shot and killed inside his car without trying to breach the checkpoint or threaten the soldiers. His pregnant wife, Sundus Shalabi, 23 years old, was able to get out of the car. She was shot 3 times in the chest. The Palestinian Health Ministry said rescue teams were able to save the life of the fetus. According to the investigation, the pregnant woman looked suspiciously at the ground. She was unarmed, and no weapons were found near her that might have served as evidence she was trying to place an explosive device. Look suspiciously at the ground. This is the justification given for butchering a pregnant woman. It should be noted that the Israeli army prevented medical staff being able to get to the pregnant woman in order to save her life and that of her unborn fetus. Imagine for a moment this had been a pregnant Israeli woman shot and killed by Hamas militants. Just imagine what would happen in those circumstances. It would be at the top of news bulletins. It would be splashed across the front of newspapers. It would trigger howls of outrage from politicians. It would be widely denounced as proof of the total evil of Hamas. Not so here, though, because Palestinian life, you see, is deemed to be completely worthless, and the Israeli state has been granted total impunity. Now, Israel has launched so-called Operation Iron Wall in the West Bank on the 21st of January, the longest operation there since the Second Intifada, so far driving 40,000 Palestinians from their homes, an act of ethnic cleansing which has received almost zero attention from the Western media. On what planet are we even discussing a ceasefire here? And yet pro-Israel commentators are out there claiming it's Hamas rather than Israel which is destroying the ceasefire. The level of gaslighting, of turning the world on its head, involved in absolving Israel of guilt for trashing the so-called ceasefire is simply astronomical. Now let's just hear Trump's latest intervention in support of his plan to forcibly deport, that is ethnically cleanse, the entire Palestinian population of Gaza.
We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians have the right to return?
Spent. No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them, because if they have to return now, it'll be years before you could ever. It's not habitable.
We'll note here how he makes clear this will be permanent, that the survivors of Gaza will be driven from their homes forever with no right of return. And now he seeks to dress up this criminal act as a humanitarian gesture, while he builds, he says, what he calls a beautiful real estate development, but not for the people who actually live there, who will be deported. Note how he says Gaza is not habitable. So he is there admitting that Israel has made Gaza uninhabitable. Let me just read from Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, which defines genocide: deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Trump here is admitting, literally by definition, that Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. It's very clear what's happening here. The so-called deal struck between Netanyahu and Trump was a sham, in which Israel would get some hostages out and then resume its genocidal onslaught. Indeed, the Israeli media a month ago reported that in the deal, if Netanyahu agreed to it, Trump would support Israel retroactively if it decided to return to fighting and violate the ceasefire. As Rohan Talbot, the director of advocacy and campaigns at Medical Aid for Palestinians, puts it, if the ceasefire is allowed to collapse, I really worry that Israel's violence will be even more wildly brutal and destructive than before. They will try to destroy the 30% of infrastructure that has so far been spared and make human life impossible so Trump's plan can come true. Well, I am afraid he's correct. It is likely a resumption of Israel's onslaught with the active support of Trump will mean a dramatic escalation of the genocidal violence to even more obscene levels than we've currently seen. That genocidal mayhem will be calculated to empty Gaza through mass slaughter and expulsion. You may have studied genocides in the past and wondered, how could they ever have been possible? How could they have been tolerated? How could they have been facilitated when they actually happened? Well, now you know. Now you know. Please like and subscribe. Do leave your thoughts and your comments. Do help us as we expand our operations at the moment, as you can see on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on patreon.com/OwenJones84, as we help challenge the disaster that is our mainstream media. I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thanks as ever for your support.